Hello and welcome back to the YouTube channel. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about field and court-based rehab and introducing change of direction. So this is at the end stage of rehab, so the beginning of the end. Now I'm 10 months into my recovery and I've just started doing this. Normally, it takes probably most people around this time point to get to the point of doing this. Realistically, for a lot of people, it's going to be at least after 6 months from a timeline point of view. So I'm going to try and keep this as simple as possible and try and explain in a way that makes you understand why doing this is important and the sort of thought processes and reasoning behind change of direction. I've started to learn more with the end stage stuff. I've learned more about ACL injuries at the end stage and the performance end of rehabilitation than I have more at the beginning, post surgery, because once we get back into the sport environment, that's where the ACL injuries happen. So if we understand sort of how and why they might happen, then we can put in purposeful interventions and um, integrate that into our thinking when we're doing tasks so that we're not just going through the motions, we can actually go away and execute a proper rehabilitation plan and understand why we need to take our time with it. So, why is it important to do this properly? So, most ACL injuries are non-contact injuries. 30% are contact, where someone will hit you and will cause stress on the knee and cause the ACL to give way. Most of the time, they're non-contact, and they happen during deceleration and change of direction tasks. So, there's a lot of force that goes through the knee when we're slowing the body down and changing the way in which we move. So we need to understand what it looks like to be technically proficient doing this. And this is more about building up our technical proficiency as well as building up our tolerance to the loads that goes through the body. Now, if we think about professional athletes, we know what a good athlete looks like and how they move. They all move well. You don't look at anybody on a football pitch or a basketball court that plays at the elite level and think they move badly. They all look like athletes. Whereas if we think about the lower level sport, we can only tell just from the way that people move that they're not necessarily athletic. And this is something that can be trained and coached. Now, obviously, you're not suddenly going to become elite movers, but we can start to apply some basic principles to put that solid foundation in place. So, one important thing to understand is that every change of direction is preceded by a deceleration. So, you have to slow your momentum down first and then change direction. That's the point at which people tend to do this badly, and that's where the injury happens because people don't decelerate properly. So essentially, the better you decelerate, the better control over your momentum you have and your body you have. And I'll show some videos that show why that is important, so the different positions and postures we need to be in and what can potentially put you more at risk. So most people, like I say, they do this part badly in the rehabilitation. If you go through the hospital setting, obviously they're quite limited with being able to get you out in the field and then put the time into explaining this and allowing you to go away and practice this maybe yourself, get video feedback, etc. And it's essentially a third of the rehab process. So we've got to remember this. As much time and energy needs to go into this part as has done the first early stage in the first 12 weeks, building muscle mass, building strength, building power, all that gym work. Once you're at this point, this becomes a bit more of the priority, learning how to move better. You should have built the underpinning physical attributes to get to this point. And then this is bringing it all together to move in that sporting environment. So essentially, if we learn how to prevent injury, well, injury prevention, it's a touchy word that in the physio, strength and conditioning world. Obviously, we can't prevent injuries, but we look at it from, right, how can we reduce the risk of another ACL injury happening? That will also improve your performance. Now, initially, we'd sort of go in with the injury prevention lens, right? What can we do to protect the knee? And then once we get good at that, we can then start to look how we progress it from a performance point of view. So both of them come hand in hand. So stage one sort of pitch court rehab is we want the environment to be high control. Now, professional athletes might start this much sooner in the recovery than the general population. I find the general population best served when they just focus on doing one thing well. People have jobs, they're not as consistent. So the last thing you want to do is be doing a pitch session here or a gym session over there. Just stick to doing one thing well at a time in most situations. So once you get onto the pitch, you should be in fairly good nick. You should be bridging the gap with your physical attributes and not doing this when you've got a lot of symmetry and deficits. Like I said, we want to try and build that up. So, but it still should be high control because we're essentially wanting to learn the basic movement patterns that are involved in pitch movement or court movement. They are essentially acceleration, deceleration, change of direction. I've not put it in high speed running, sprinting. That's something that would progress a bit further on because we're not just going to go and sprint all out to begin with, and then we can introduce some or progress some of the conditioning work as well. That's kind of something we might do at the end of the pitch rehab. So just something to consider is the forces through the knee with the different types of movement. So accelerations, 2.2 times body weight, decelerations, 5.9 times body weight, sprinting, 4.4 times body weight. So we can see that deceleration puts almost 3 times the amount of force through the knee than an acceleration does. So we need to think about that in terms of when we're actually doing our rehab. We can tolerate doing a lot more accelerations than we can decelerations. So be prepared that when you first do this, your knee might be a bit achy and a bit sore because it's just doing things it's not done, and we might need to build up with the decelerations sensibly over a period of time. So when you get onto the pitch, there's two variables that are really important to control: the speed and the kind of intensity, which can come hand in hand. So if you're doing pitch rehab to begin with, you're not going to run at maximum speed and do 100% effort. That would be stupid because you're not going to be able to organize your body in a way that allows you to do things proficiently. So one way in which we can control speed and intensity is reducing the space in which we do activity. So if we give you 50 meters to run in, that's a lot of distance to be able to build up your maximum speed. Whereas if we keep things in maybe 5, 10 meters, you're never going to hit speeds high enough that puts significant amount of stress on the knee. So we can start to progress the distance in which we do things over time as a way to control these kind of variables on the knee that may put you at more risk. It's a bit like progressing the weight in the gym. We increase the speed, we increase the intensity. So just something to consider. You might start at 50, 60, 70% intensity when you're doing the tasks that I'm going to go through. Like I say, it's normally after 6 months we do this. So this is just a nice visual to understand your change of direction. So if we think about running in a straight line, obviously we just sprint and there's no consideration of change direction. That rarely happens in a sporting environment. There's normally some obstacle we have to navigate around, whether it's reacting to the ball or a person that is going to obviously force a lot of change of direction in a game. So if you are running and let's say you're running at someone, rugby or football, and you want to change your angle by less than 45 degrees, we can see that that's in the green zone. And there's minimal braking that needs to take place. It's almost just like a redirect. So as you run at somebody and you want to change direction less than 45 degrees, you're essentially putting your leg outside of your base of support and just redirecting your travel. So like I say, there's not a braking element within the knee that we need to consider too much. As we get beyond 45 degrees, there has to be an element of slowing down. So you can see the yellow zone progressing into the red. And that will determine how much demand, like I say, is on the knee and the risk to the knee. You will get a better idea when I show you visually with some of the videos on the next slides. So more braking essentially means we need to create more force. So we do that eccentrically. Now, I know that's a big word that a lot of people don't understand, but eccentric means creating force in a lengthening position. So if we think about a leg extension for the quads, the upward movement is concentric. That's a shortening, a contraction. We produce force that way, but we also produce force when we're lowering the pad. That's eccentric. We're capable of creating much higher forces eccentrically than we are concentrically in the shortening position. So as you brake, you're almost stretching your quad, creating a lot of tension through the quad, and that will slow you your momentum down. So we know that poor braking during change of direction or cutting can increase knee loading. So we need to find a way that is efficient, proficient in order to minimize that stress on the knee, and getting the right body positions and mechanics right and doing everything right can reduce those forces on the knee. It's when people don't do this properly that's where they're at more risk of re-injuring themselves or injuring themselves for the first time. So try to think simply about your change of direction. So that final push up is a result of everything that happened before. So this is just a screenshot of me doing a 180. At this point, I quite nicely spring out of the final turn, and that's what we want it to be. The more force you've had to absorb, or the lack of ability to slow your body down, means that final push, there's more load that we have to try and control. If that last push off is not quick and snappy, we've not done a good enough job beforehand. So, like I say, that final push, the point where we're actually changing direction and accelerating into another direction, if you've not done everything well before that, that becomes a very difficult, awkward acceleration. So I'm just going to play this. So this is just a simple acceleration to begin with. Now this is just over 5 meters. We can almost start further than this, but I'm a little bit nervous about my hamstring at the minute. I've had a few issues with it, and I'm just trying to get used to accelerating again. So you can see I'm fairly good at putting force into the ground. Probably need to keep my head up a little bit more there and chest up a little bit. But I'm quite good at putting force into the ground to accelerate. Different people have different preferences with the way they move. So someone might be more springy, they're trying to get more air time. And you can see that it's almost like they're trying to cycle through the air. Whereas if you look at someone like me, I look quite good at just putting force through the ground and really pushing through and accelerating. Now we can accelerate in different ways. So I'm doing kind of a softish start there. I'm just rolling into the acceleration. Or you can get into a kneeling position, a bit more of a harder start, where you have to really develop that acceleration power in deeper ranges. So doing it from left leg to right leg, different starting positions is something you need to incorporate. Now this is a linear deceleration. So what you can see as I start to decelerate, in the acceleration, we can just kind of run it out and slow ourselves down over 5, 10 meters, whereas this is a bit more of a hard stop. So I'm using 10 meters acceleration, and then I'm trying to slow myself down. So again, I'm controlling for that speed and intensity. Just slow this down. So as I come in, I start to brake, and then it should be the first contact to brake is where the highest force is produced eccentrically in the brake. So that left knee's taking the most force, and then right leg, left leg, and you see heel strike start to sit down, and I try and produce quick steps to decelerate my body. I'll just let that run through again. Then it's pat, 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 pat to try and stop myself. When people decelerate badly, they either overstride the first step and they don't sit down into the position. Again, if I probably don't need to sit down because I'm not really going that fast in a short distance, but I'm trying to learn, get a feel for what it's like. So I break myself probably over 2 to 3 meters there. So it's get myself low, pat, 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 and then nice joint angles on the deceleration. Brake, brake, brake. Nice squat position. So you can see I get myself really low there. So the interesting thing about deceleration is that in a real life situation during sport, you'll never, or if ever, decelerate in a linear position. But this is something we're just working on initially to get a feel for it. So we need to progress this over time by doing different types of decelerations and angles, leading with one foot rotating. So you can see here, if you're coming up to a defender and then you want to jockey them, you might enter with a bit more of rotation. And this is just prepping my body for a 180-degree turn. This is me just getting for a feel for it as well. You can see I do it better or more steps on the left leg. So I've had a difficulty braking with my right leg on the inside. So I take four, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see that last step is quite heavy, actually. Be interesting to see if I could have got out of that one. I'll show you some interesting videos next. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Decelerate. Now I'm in a position where I could easily pop out of that. I've decelerated well. So I'm learning to take more steps on that inside leg. And again, you can see it pat, 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 to really slow myself down. I'm trying to get in that athletic position, that squat position, because we need to be in a bit of a bend to be able to accelerate out when we're changing direction. So you're not upright. And this is an example of a lateral shuffle. So what you can see with this, again, you don't really do this in football. You might maybe do this in another sport, but again, it's about the positions and the angles. So as I come into this, you can see a break on that inside leg and then a pop on the outside. I do that quite nicely there. And you can see that the angle, oh, let me go back. What's going on here? Yeah. I don't know why it's doing that. Pausing, but I'll have to. There we go. So at this point, there's a nice line. If you look at my outer leg, my ankle, my knee, my torso is in a nice straight line. So I'm redirecting my body to go back the other way. I've started to lean my torso to the direction that I want to go. Now, if you think about doing this badly, if I don't slow myself down, that outside leg is going to take more force and my trunk is at risk of my left shoulder going over my left hip. So I get that trunk lean, that upper body trunk lean, and then the knee will try and counteract that by rotating inwards. That is a common mechanism for an ACL injury. So you've not decelerated well, that outer leg takes all the load, trunk rotates, leans, and then the knee rotates inwards. I can't pause this for some reason, which is a bit frustrating without going to the next slide. You see on this next one, I think it is that I do this quite badly. I almost jump into it. Ooh, do that again. So you can see here, I don't decelerate properly, and then all the force goes onto that outer leg. So I collapse a bit more. Managed to reposition myself okay. But you can see my trunk there. It's a little bit more upright because I've not controlled my momentum properly. So as I come in, don't decelerate properly on the inside leg. Trunk slightly has to shift the right shoulder over the right hip more. And as I come out of it, I'm not as straight. So again, it's not to say that if you do that, you will always injure your ACL. It depends how much force is going through the knee and different factors. You can see over this side, much better as I come out, much more angled the way I want to go. And I think I do it better on this one. Yeah, you can see a lot straighter as a push off. So I'm at that 45-degree angle. Angled out, so a lot straighter. And then this is my, let it run through actually first. It's a 90-degree change direction. So what you can see here, if I'm running a cone, I need to change direction at 90 degrees. I have to slow my body down in order to accelerate out. So in order to do that, if we go back to the first, So as I'm approaching the cone, I start to lower my hips, reduce my step stride distance, and that allows me to then push out, quick pop, and then accelerate off that inside leg. And again on this side. So pat, 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 pop out, accelerate. Now, again, if you do this badly, what I was doing initially, because I wasn't lowering myself and braking properly, as you push out, my trunk really folded, so my chest was almost at the knee because I hadn't decelerated properly. So your body is going to compensate if you're not braking. And then I can pop out and accelerate. And then this is the 180. So this is the 180. You'll see this is quite interesting. See, I don't decelerate properly on this. So as I, again, ignore the fact I'm on my knee, this is just an example of a different type of acceleration. So a bit of a harder start, rotating out. As I come in, it's not too bad if it's only 5 meters. But on this one, you can see a bit more speed because it's across 10 meters, and then my chest, I fold in half like a deck chair there. So because I've not decelerated properly, I'm having to try and compensate through my hip, and it's a harder get out. It's not as efficient. Show you again. So on the left one, decelerate, decelerate. Do an okay job, fold ever so slightly, and then coming up to the right. Don't break, and then a fold again. You can see the difference on the next one. This is a better one. And again, on the weaker side, the side I don't like turning on. You can see why, and it's because I've taken more steps to slow down. You can see the difference on the right side here. Chest isn't quite as far towards my knees. Bring it over to this side. Start to break, start to rotate my body in the direction I want to go to. That final push off, and you see the difference there compared to the previous slide. I think that was my screenshot from the one of the initial pages. So that inside leg is you sink into. That right leg I sink, and then the outside leg. At this point, I've slowed myself down appropriately, and I just pop out. So it's coming in, break, 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 and then bounce out easy. And it's such a big difference. And it felt good when I did that. I really noticed a difference because I was really struggling to stop myself from folding, and I knew wasn't. And I just really concentrated on taking more steps to control my momentum. And I was quite happy with that. You can see it's nice. So if I do it in full speed, doing it slow, 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 pop out. It's that because my braking was good, that final pop out, it's almost like you stood there and you can push from a standstill. Because can I say that? My momentum is not going over to my left, my shoulder. I'm able to lean my torso in the direction I want to go to, and I get that nice straight angle from my ankle, knee, hip, up through my trunk. And then you can see how quick it is. Let's just go back to the other one. It just looks a bit stickier coming out. Just a little bit harder, a bit longer to change the direction. You can see the fold. And we go to the next one. Coming out of it just looks ever so slightly nicer and bouncier. So yeah, so hopefully that gives you a good insight into why it's important to break and just some of the nuances. And this is why it's really important to film yourself because the first times I didn't really see myself folding. I didn't really feel it. And once I slowed the video down, I could see the mistakes I was making, and then I could put the intervention in place to take more steps and really try and break earlier and understand how I can make that more efficient and safer for my knee. Like I say, it's very robotic this in a sense that we're just doing 90 degrees, 180s. It's never going to happen like that in a game, but it's introducing that first step to feeling and understanding your body. And then as things progress in the field we have, that's where we introduce a little bit more chaos. Somebody telling you to go left or right, and then you have to react, but still maintain good postures and positions. That's going to be the challenge for you. That's why you can't just go from run around a few cones and then straight into a game, because if you're not running around a few cones very well, you may or may not get feedback on that. You can't just go straight into the game because there's so much else going on, and you've got to still develop these protective movements for your knee. And that's where, if you do it gradually, you can start to get feedback on yourself. So hopefully that was useful. If there's any questions, obviously drop a comment or feel free to DM me at Rick Williams _ACL coach. Be happy to chat there.